Dr. Jodie Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. It's hard being a kid these days, and I often ask my two teens. Regular listeners to the show will know that as of recording this, in June 2024, I have a 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl. And even just this morning, actually, I asked our daughter, what's the hardest thing about being a kid these days? And she said, getting out of bed. And I thought, that's not so bad. It must be a good week. As hard as it is for our kids, you know, there are a lot of challenges. And I think it's a really nice question for us to ask our kids and really listen so we can get a little bit of a window into kind of what their biggest challenges are. It's really hard being a parent. Oh, goodness, we just didn't know what we were getting ourselves in for, did we? It's so joyful and so rewarding, but goodness, it can, you know, create a lot of stress and worry and angst, and especially if our kids are struggling. You know, we are all trying to raise really emotionally healthy and resilient, healthy kids, physically healthy, emotionally healthy, mentally healthy kids. We want them to be connected. We want them to be connected with their school, with their friends, with us. We also want them to kind of start kind of, you know, letting go a little bit from the closeness to our families as they get older and connecting with their friends, which is what they're sort of really wired to do. We want them just to meet all the developmental milestones and do all the things that kids are meant to do as they go through the years. But, you know, it's pretty tough as a parent because we're raising kids and we're trying to do the best thing by them, but we're also navigating the really complex landscape of kids' friendships and social media, schoolwork challenges, mental health, body image, identity, the global issues that can be so worrying, the peer pressure that our kids are facing each and every day if you speak to a lot of them, and so much more. So it's just a joy to have today's guest joining us today to help us better understand how to navigate parenting is child psychologist and author Deirdre Brandner. Deirdre is a renowned psychologist. She is a media commentator. You may have seen her on the television, heard her on the radio, seen her work in written form as well. She has over 30 years' experience in helping children and families conquer social, emotional and academic challenges. So we're really lucky to have her here with us today for a really great conversation. So Deirdre, welcome and thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Oh, me too. Deirdre and I both love a good chat. So it always, I mean, that makes podcasting such a joy when you can have a conversation with someone like yourself about a topic we're both really passionate about. So, you know, I mentioned in your introduction, you've got lots of strings to your bow. You're also the co-founder of Bluestone Families, which we'll talk about later, and an author of some beautiful books with more to come. So I'd really love for you to share those with our listeners a little bit later. But to start with, you have spent 3 decades as a child psychologist, and I know that what you've said to me is that children are struggling more than ever. Can you tell us what you're seeing in your work, please, Deirdre?
And look, you're so right. As we track through in parenting, we want to be the best parents we can be. We want our kids to be okay. And I don't think it takes, you know, us experts to explain that we know that our kids are not doing well at the moment. And it's really interesting to look back, as you said, 30 years being a psychologist and how things have changed. And I would have to say that our kids are struggling now more than ever. And as a result of that, our parents are struggling more than ever. Yeah. And, you know, we hear about it in the media every day and people say, well, why? You know, it must be phones, you know, it must be, you know, our parenting or our discipline or our schools. And look, the reality is it's a combination of a lot of things. And I don't think it's always helpful pointing fingers or blaming. You know, I really like to think if we're honest about what's going on for our kids, it's what we can be doing about it. Yeah. But if you want some insight into what I'm seeing every day in my clinical practice and my work with families is definitely an increase in anxiety. You know, there's lots of data out there around that. And, you know, people say, is that linked to an increase in depression? For my cohort that I see, children and teens, it's more likely to be the anxiety that comes first.
Right, yes.
Yeah, and then the depressive symptoms. usually as related to the anxiety. So that's probably the first thing I'm seeing a huge increase in. I feel like children are very much struggling with academic learning. And, I come from a background where my previous career was as a school teacher, and that's actually what led me into becoming a child psychologist. So a lot of my colleagues are teachers, principals, educators, specialists, and they too are finding it really hard to navigate the demands on them as teachers and the way the classrooms work differently now. And thirdly, most importantly, I see as a real presentation in our clinical practice is issues with sense of self, identity, and connecting with others. And whilst adolescence is a normal time, you've got children in this age, Jodie, more than ever that, teens is about, who are my friends? Who do I want to be? What do I want to be? But that's been made so much more complex by undoubtedly, media, internet access that 30 years ago, in the olden days when I started out, we didn't have that. And even when I was, my kids are in their late 20s, early 30s. So except for the youngest one, I got to parent through pretty much, definitely we had internet, but social media wasn't what it was back then. And, hats off to parents now, because you guys are doing a great job, because you are dealing with so many more hurdles than, me as a so-called expert ever had to do.
That's exactly right. And I think back to my childhood as a child, I guess, growing up in the late 70s and the 80s. And it was such a cool time to grow up. And all we had to compare ourselves with were our immediate circle of friends, the kids in our school, maybe the ones at I played a lot of netball. And when we think about our kids now, and it was interesting, I was just at the Mental Health in Schools conference, and there was an expert there talking about TikTok and the influence of social media. And one of Dr. Scott Griffiths, I think, was the researcher who did the presentation, just as an example of what our kids are facing. They were looking at eating disorders, teenagers with eating disorders, and what the TikTok algorithm was sharing with these young people. And they had to do a lot of algorithm scraping, they called it. I think it's hacking is another term, just to try to get really underneath what's happening. And what they found was that young people with eating disorders were 23% more likely to have liked a post that was related to, restrictive eating or over-exercising or, more serious kind of posts around eating disorders. But they were 335% more likely to have received that content in the first place. And that's just one example. And so these kids are, when they've got that device in their hands and they're exposed to so much, and so they're not just kind of trying to fit in with their peers, they're trying to conform. As we know, they like to conform, especially as teenagers, very much with the peer group. It's just sort of, we're just scraping the iceberg talking about this with the challenges. It's just so different, isn't it?
It is. And, it's the idea of, as research tells us as parents, we've actually become more protective of our children and our teens in the real world. Like, we give them a phone because, what they're not within my eye shot. What if something happened? We don't let them take risks because we don't want them to injure themselves, or we don't let them deal with the disappearing for a couple of hours without knowing where they are. Like, you and I grew up.
Yes.
There was no 360 live where we could track where we were. But when the digital world opens up to our kids, we've actually, as parents, relinquished protecting them online, because we actually don't, because we didn't grow up with this, so we don't know what our children are being exposed to. We don't, you and I talked about our challenges with technology when we started today. We don't know what they're seeing, what these algorithms are doing, what the misinformation they're getting, what the manipulation of information they're getting. So we are dealing with something really unknown, But at the same time, if we were to say, hand over your phone, you're not having social media, I think we can all be pretty safe in guessing what that would look like. But I feel as parents, instead of trying to put out fires everywhere, we have to inform and empower parents about what they can be doing, because we know, evidence tells us that the best mental health intervention is parent connectedness. And I feel that a lot of us have given over experts. We read about these experts. You're an expert, I'm an expert, but we know that if we can empower parents with knowledge and skills and tools, that is what's going to make the difference moving forward. So instead of being terrified about all this data and information, and it is, it scares us. We know our kids are in crisis. We know that we've lost control of so much of what they're exposed to, but it's working to how we reclaim those connections with our kids and how we get back on track.
This approach that you have and this philosophy is why I just love your work so much, because it's very easy for us to catastrophize and to kind of feel overwhelmed by the mental health statistics and by, what I said before about eating disorders and TikTok. And it really comes down to we have a very profound impact on our kids through our relationships, and there's so much that we can do. So what would you want parents to, I guess, lots of questions come to mind around attachment and about time. And I love that quote that there's no way to be a perfect parent, but a million ways to be a good one.
Yes.
We don't have time for a million, but maybe you could share a few with us.
And you raised, Jodie, a really important point, connection. That is the number one key. And I know it's really hard to connect when our child's iPad, or their TikTok is going to be way more engaging than us. But my other thing is connection and starting small. You only need to do one small thing a day that can make a difference. And I think with the overload of information out there, as parents, what's that saying? We're overwhelmed with information but starved of wisdom.
Yeah.
Pick 2 or 3 things that you're going to try and do differently. So it might be looking past the tale of destruction that your child represented this morning and acknowledging something they did. Gosh, that can be hard.
Yes.
It's showing an interest in what they're interested in. So for teens, it might be, show me the best suitable meme that you saw today, or, talk with them about, who's someone they like on TikTok and why that is, and doing that without judgment. Kids are terrified to connect with us if they think we're going to be lectured or judged. And even though we might have a whole lot to say about that, connection is not a one-way street. Both of us have to be in that moment.
Yes.
So if you want to catch them being good, finding something they're interested in and sitting in the moment with them, listening to them without feeling that you need to, provide a whole lot of advice on a topic. And I saw something the other day, I love gathering information, and I thought it was really powerful. If you're the parent of teens, let them be wrong without having to tell them.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, can I just tell you a personal example that just stung a little bit? Okay, so our daughter, 14, has a lash serum. Okay,
Yes.
and I have as do you, a strong academic background, and I'm like, there is nothing that can make hair grow longer. All right, let's just. And so she'd seen some very expensive one, and I'm like, well, you've got your savings. That's not we're not touching that, but you've got your spend money. Go for your life. And she was like, wouldn't you use it too? And I know what that means. Like, you buy it, Mum. Anyway, she ended up buying one, and the other day she was showing me how long her lashes were. Gorgeous thing. And anyway, I just couldn't help myself. I did just remind her, but I burst her bubble. I did burst her bubble. I know I did. And it's a $10 lash serum. There's no harm in it. We've got to remind ourselves, we've got to let them learn through experience, don't we? So I really take that to heart, that idea about let them be wrong and not have to tell them.
And you said something really important there, Jodie. you said it wasn't doing any harm. Obviously, if they're participating in a behaviour that we know is going to be a complete disaster and harmful to them physically or emotionally, we will guide them in a different direction. But, I love that you allowed her that autonomy to make that purchase because, we do, our kids are not always going to do what they want, what we want them to do.
Yeah.
But we also need to let them fail and learn for themselves. And someone else who probably, got less academic knowledge than we do will tell her that lash serum doesn't work. She's more likely to listen to them than us. But, that's not my role. I'm a mum. I don't need to be the lash serum expert. I need to be the one that she comes to when things are bad, when she's struggling, when she's overwhelmed. That's who I want to be for my child. So, it is, as parents, it's really tricky, and I think sometimes as parents, Jodie, we do make it about us.
Yeah.
Because there's all this pressure to be the perfect parent. And, I remember a really profound experience I had when, he's now 30 now, but when he was doing year 12, this is all wrapped up in our parent guilt of, never being good enough. And you said before, you can't be the perfect parent, but there's a million ways to be a good one. I came in from work one day, my busy practice, I walked in, he was in year 12 and he was slumped, over his work, crying. He never cried, but he was crying. And I went in and I said, Paddy, what's up? And he said, oh, I just can't do this anymore. It's so hard, Mum. It's just so hard. And I said, oh, my God, it's because I'm working too much. I need to be here more. And do you know what he said to me? Out of the mouth of teens or babes?
Yeah.
Please not make this about you.
Oh, okay.
And he's right. I made it about me.
Yes.
I was gutted by his emotional distress and I made it all about me. And he was right. He didn't need to hear about my sucking about how bad I felt in that moment because my child was struggling, which, by the way, is completely normal.
Yes.
And I should know that as a child psychologist. But what he needed from me in that moment was just to be there and validate his feelings.
Yeah.
So, all those parents and listeners out there, us child psychologists make just as many errors every day.
Oh, Peter rang me yesterday. My husband, he rang me from work yesterday, and it's usually me instigating these conversations. But he rang me and he said, "Hey, I just wanted to say to you that," and it really, truly, like this is just one out of the box. But he just said, "I'm just feeling so thankful for the family. Our daughter had years of headaches. We've solved that problem now. She's, we're just, we've certainly got plenty of lemons, in our life." But I think just in our little family unit, he was just ringing. He was just reflecting that, hey, things are really good and I'm noticing and he just wanted, and it was just a beautiful phone call. And I shared that with the kids last night at dinner and said, Dad and I had a great conversation today. We're really proud of you both for X reasons. And I said, and would you believe Dad started that conversation, that their ears pricked up a little bit. They're kind of like they're used to Mum saying it, probably roll their eyes. But one of the things that we were talking about was one of the things you said earlier, and I don't know if this is common, but it's hard to get out of the habit of like this trail of destruction. The things I could tell you are the things that no doubt other parents would share. And we agreed, Peter and I agreed, that we're going to really, we don't pick them up on everything. We don't pick them up on everything. You'd hardly have a good word to say some days. And so we know not to do that, but we're just trying to dial it back even more and just let so much more go. I'm actually finding that quite hard. Is that unusual? Because I know other parents listening might be thinking too, the clothes, we have makeup that gets, I don't know how it gets where it gets, but it gets, like it was on the bathtub yesterday and our son was smashing the sourdough on, the frozen sourdough in the plastic on the bench, and then he pulled it out of the plastic to sort of break up the slices, and I'm like, just make sure you give that a wipe. Well, did he wipe it? No. I came in and wiped it and said nothing. There's so many things. I'm so pleased I haven't said anything, but it was quite hard.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that? It's private therapy now, people. You're just listening.
You know what? you said you find it quite hard, and that's normal because you're retraining something. Okay.
Yeah.
We are primed to attend to negative, as a part of our biological function. So switching it to letting the small stuff go and
Yeah.
concentrating on the big stuff, that takes time and effort. And I think once you start to do it, it's great. But, you have to start small. And, you said about the clothes in the room. So you say, you know what, this is what I'm setting up. This is my boundary. As long as all their stuff's actually in their room, I'm not going to worry about the room, what the room looks like.
I'm going to shut the door.
Yeah, once a week, I'm going to come in and say, hey, guys, I'm just going to do a bit of a check. Put some boundaries in that make it okay for you, that minimizes the amount of negative interactions.
Yes.
The other thing is, kids don't want to be told, stop, don't do that. What are you doing? How come? If you're going to have an interaction and it means not noticing the small stuff, focusing on what they're doing right, even if it's only once in a while, and get them to keep doing that. And you've got to be really smart when you do that, because I think we're already tempted when we see them doing something great and we say, oh, thanks, buddy. You put away all those dishes as soon as I asked you. That was fantastic. What a great help. We would usually end up with, if you could just do that all the time, ourselves, okay, give them a compliment and let it hang there, let it dangle there, and just say, oh, thanks for, bringing your bag in your room. Now could you put all your other stuff away? So the more we shift that thinking of letting the small stuff go and just focusing on rewarding them or acknowledging when the good stuff happens, it just sets up a better interaction, a better dialogue. And look, I'll tell you now, as having, kids who move out and come back in, they come back in, you're happy they're happy to spend a bit of time with you at home, but you watch your house turning to chaos. And I can't tell you, Jody, when my son came back last time on one of his trips with 3 surfboards that sat in the good room at the front for 3 weeks, really had to dig deep on that one. But what's more important? That he was happy to come back home, that eventually he said to me, oh, look, Mum, I'm moving those surfboards out of the front room because I know you'd hate them being in there.
Oh.
It actually took a little while. I didn't have to make a big deal about it, and it did happen.
Yeah.
So, letting the small stuff go, but still having some boundaries, that's the balance we need.
It really is. You're right. And I think every parent listening is probably thinking of an example in their own home as well, that we're so consumed by work and, trying to keep all of sort of the balls in the air, keeping households running and, all the things done, that sometimes we're not present and mindful to our responses, are we? So for listeners who are sort of feeling like, oh, goodness, that's going to be a real change for me, knowing that it's important and wanting to make the change. You said about starting really small. Have you, and one of the things maybe this might be a good example, was about sort of spending some quality time once a day. For listeners who are sort of thinking, oh gosh, I want to connect more, I want to listen more, I want to show more interest and less judgment, and all the things that we know will be helpful. We don't have to do it all at once. What would be a handful of ways or examples you could share with us to help parents go, yeah, these are some concrete examples of what I could do, maybe if they're not sure where to start?
So I think, if we do it like sort of almost, developmentally. So, with little ones, and, I'll be honest, I used to hate going to the park with my kids, major mess up. I just thought it was boring. So going to the park meant they were running off. I was much better indoor person playing. So even so, when they're playing, we usually run around and do things.
Yeah.
They're quiet, they're occupied. So my challenge to you is join them in play.
Okay.
Join them in play for 10 minutes. 5 minutes if that's all you've got. That is a moment of connection. Okay? For that next group up, read with them. And this is not about expecting your child to read. That is the most powerful moment for real connection, is reading a book that they choose, not a book that you choose. even if it means you read the same book every night, even if you know it's got no literary value whatsoever. I don't care. I don't care if it's a football record.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't care if it's Ronaldo's latest stats from I don't care what it is. Read with your child, read to your child.
Mm.
Dinner time. Food, they're a captive market when we're feeding them. All right? So the number one rule should always be no phones at the table.
Mm.
Okay? No phones at the table. And the greatest problem with that is us.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing, as a moment of connection, we'll say, oh, it's always a disaster at dinner time because so-and-so doesn't like this and so-and-so annoyed so-and-so. And so it is about, when you're sort of about letting go of the small stuff.
Yeah.
Take the battle out of dinner time. All right? I know that's a real stressor for families, what they're eating. If you want to connect with your kids at dinner, stop talking about their manners, stop talking about what they're eating and not eating. Okay? Talk about something that was the funniest thing they saw today.
Yeah.
All right? Talk about something that surprised them today. Talk about something that was kind that they saw today. So they would be at that level. At teens, serious hard time, in the car. Okay? Have a rule that for the first 5 minutes we're in the car, earpods out. Only 5 minutes and you can put them back in. If you say, I don't want you on your phone the whole time we're in the car, I want those headphones down the whole time we're in the car, they're not going to want to do it.
Yeah.
You say the first 5 minutes or until we get onto the freeway or whatever it is that's tangible. Being present with them in a car with a teenager is the best time because they don't have to look at you. They can't get out, hopefully. But it is about, and also do not play your radio station, your music, or your podcast. That's, I'm going to teach my child to learn about the world news by listening to, ABC National. That's not going to happen.
No.
So, yeah.
Oh, they are all such great examples. You mentioned about dinner time, and there's so much brilliant research around connecting for a meal, which, might not be every night. And it doesn't have to be dinner, by the way. It could be all for breakfast. If kids are off with musical theatre or sport or whatever, it can be a bit tricky. But it's really important. I love to bring the family together for dinner. They would prefer not to, but they're teenagers and that's normal. But we've talked about the research before. I have. Oh, what a nerd! And sort of said, look, it's really important. This is actually really important, and shared that the research also speaks to the fact that families who have meals together, the children are less likely to smoke or do drugs or get pregnant at a very young age, and so the running sort of joke in the house now is with our son, we don't want him getting pregnant, so got to have dinner together, and that's kind of become the running joke about having meals together. But I really like what you're emphasising is it's about we've got these moments, we've got these opportunities, and a previous guest, Cherie Clonan, talked about. This wasn't the gist of the whole conversation. She's an incredible, proudly autistic CEO of a company here in Melbourne called the Digital Picnic. So we talked a lot about autism and leadership and family and parenting, and she talked about legacy. She used this word legacy as a parent, and it really stuck with me because I think now about my parents and I guess their legacy in that. When I think about them as parents, I have particular ideas that come to mind about each of them, and they're both different. And I now think, well, I wonder what my kids will think about me when they're an adult and they're thinking of what legacy will I leave as a parent. And, there always seems so much to do, and especially with older kids, they don't want to connect with us as much. I used to play board games or read at night. They don't want to do that anymore. Sometimes. And so, these concrete examples of being able to spend, there's a small amount of time. The other stuff will always get done, and
Yes.
it's so monotonous. It's always there, whether it's tidying up, vacuuming or washing or cleaning or, 5 minutes away from the desk if it's work, working from home. I guess if we can slow down and be a little bit more mindful, then we can consider more often what's most important here.
Yes.
And I'm so thankful that you've been able to share kind of age-appropriate ideas. The podcasting thing is interesting, isn't it? Because Peter and I were listening to Crime Junkie, which is a crime podcast, of course, and because of the content, we were listening. Our son had his headphones on, and he's older, so he was doing his own thing. But our daughter was asleep, and so we were listening in the car. And then when I realised she woke up, I quickly turned it off, and she's like, "Don't turn it off. That is so interesting." And now she wants to work in kind of in law around sort of, criminal defence or criminal prosecution, which she's so fascinated by it. And so sometimes those things can bring you together on long trips. But that quiet time to have a bit of a chat about, even if it's just about what's coming up in the day. If you're driving to school, like, what have you got on today? And that usually generates a bit of a chat about what's coming, what subjects, who they do and don't like, that's teaching. And so, it's just seizing a little opportunity often is probably...
I love that. A little bit every day is much more powerful. And stepping into their world and really making it a non-judgmental space. That is, particularly with our teens, that's really critical. Because they're not comfortable when it gets tough.
They will. And it is easy to be judgmental about some of the rubbish that kids watch on YouTube. I mean, some of it, it's like, why am I watching this with you? Like, I'm in my head, I'm thinking, why am I actually interested in this? Because there's so much relatable content, but a lot of it you just think, oh, it's killing brain cells just while we're standing here. But non-judgmental, because they're evolving, they're growing, they're developing, and they'll come to their own conclusions over time.
We're there to help, support and guide. We can't impart our adult knowledge in their brains, but, we want to keep them safe. So, it's the most important thing, safe and connected, I think is what we all want for our children. And, letting them fail, letting them mess up, because I think that's one of, often I think we're drawn to, we're going to tell them what to do. We're going to tell them that's no good for them. They shouldn't be watching this or listening to this, because if I do that, nothing bad will ever happen to them. And it's coming from a place of love. And we even say that, I'm only telling you this because I love you. They're not believing any of that.
No.
And it also, it's about us giving guidance where we need it and being there when they stumble to pick them up. And I think that's a really uncomfortable role as a parent. I know myself, my youngest has, severe anaphylaxis, and as a parent, pushing him to do things and go on things which were terrifying for him and me, but he had to learn to manage that. Because I wasn't always going to be there. And it's hard. I'm not going to lie to parents out there. Letting your child step into a world that's scary and dangerous, but having faith and trust that we've set them up for success. Because we can't wrap them in cotton wool, because then we transfer our own anxiety to them.
Yes.
And we're alarmed. Even though we try to mask it, sometimes quite unsuccessfully, they will pick up on that. And, anxiety is contagious.
It really is. And a friend and I work, because we've got 16-year-olds who are about to start driving. And she's actually got older kids and one more coming through who'll be her last kind of learner driver. But she was saying that she got a really great piece of advice. And I think it kind of speaks to not just teaching someone to drive, but she didn't want to take her daughter onto the freeway. She just didn't want to get out on the freeway at 100 Ks, and she was saying to someone, "Oh, I don't want to," and they said, "Well, you've got a choice. You either go with them while you've got some influence, and while or they'll do it on their own when they're out of the nest, or when they're solo driving, independently driving on their Ps in their car." So, I guess if we can let the reins go and give them more, guide them and age appropriate and all that jazz, but let them have more independence and fail when they've got a warm, safe, soft place to land at home, and to learn and to, unpack it and to, develop resilience through it, because we know resilience isn't built in a vacuum, rather than kind of protect. And then all of a sudden when they do move out, they're facing the world without, the family there to kind of come home to. And does that bring us to helicopter parenting? I wonder if this is something that we could talk about now, because what are you seeing? What are you seeing, and how could you explain helicopter parenting? And for anyone who identifies as a helicopter parent after listening, what might be a good first step to kind of stepping back a little?
Look, I think, this is not, no one chooses to feel like this. And helicopter parenting obviously is, some refer to it as overprotecting or clearing the way so nothing bad ever happens. What it really is about, and I think we're seeing much more of it in the last 10 years because of the information download. We can talk about this for hours. We've got so much information. We hear bad news all the time. There's a news cycle. We never get to switch off, so on and so on. So what has happened is we've stepped into a world because we know more and we go, wow, there's some really dangerous stuff out there. I feel really uncomfortable with this, this the most precious thing I have in this world. I don't want anything bad ever to happen to them. And we see that we inadvertently prevent our kids from doing things or subtly push them in a direction that makes us feel safe. And kids cue into that and they go, oh, Mum doesn't think it's okay for me to get the train. She wants to drop me. Oh, why not? Much rather get a lift to school every day than get on the train. But really, we're doing two things now. We're pretending we can keep our child safe because if I drive them to school every day, nothing bad's going to happen. And secondly, if I put my child on a train when I could possibly drive them, I'm a bad parent. So, we get stuck in this cycle of, wanting to protect them from harm because it reduces our anxious feelings. And we know that what happens is our kids don't have, you mentioned before the word resilience, they don't have coping strategies. And when a small thing happens, it's unfamiliar. I'm not used to this feeling of helplessness or panic or chaos, and they don't know what to do. And you talked about how am I seeing it? I'm seeing coming through my door every day, people saying that their child's got anxiety. No, they don't. They feel anxious. And to feel anxious is completely normal. And I think in this idea of, we've heard so much about mental health, I've got to do everything in my power to ensure that my child never, ever has anxiety, and I'm going to take them to Deirdre and she's going to wave her magic wand and she's going to fix it. And guess what? I am not the answer. And secondly, your child doesn't have anxiety.
Yeah.
Anxious feelings are normal. Having skills to navigate that, we can teach our kids. And if we recognise that in ourselves and we start doing that ourselves, if we can do it for ourselves, we're much better at doing it for our children. And, I've often, I'm sure, shocked my patients and their parents by saying, what I've let my child do. And, I remember I give talks for allergy conferences often about kids and anxiety and allergies and hear the collective gasp when I explained that, my 19-year-old son is now, roaming Europe with an EpiPen. I'm more worried about him getting intoxicated and, driving one of those, what do they call them? Those pretend jeeps across a Greek island than eating something. not using the EpiPen. It is about us learning to let go, because if my anxiety ruled his life, I would never have let him leave the country.
No.
And what I'm doing, I'm stopping him from growing up and being everything he can be. Would I love if, he just wanted to go to, Byron Bay or Noosa for a holiday, not to a country with a peanut allergy. But you can't do that. We have to address our own anxious thinking as parents so we don't make it contagious.
Yes.
Check yourself, guys. Parenting is about worrying about them,
Yeah.
but let's not dictate all our decisions.
Yes, it's something that I've wrestled with and I've verbalised in our home. And if something comes up, I can't think. An example doesn't come to mind, but I know I know in the past I've said, I want to revisit what we were talking about. I realised the way I responded was because of my anxiety, and I don't I want to kind of revisit it and come back and let's have that conversation again about what you're doing or what you're choosing to do or how you're choosing to do it. And so I think it's nice, isn't it, to be able to kind of like own up to it, recognise it, own up to it, and then repair and try again, because we always get more opportunities, don't we?
Do. And I love that you use that word of, coming back going, you know what, that was freaking me out. And that's why, but you know what, I thought about it. It's my issue. I'm going to let you go. But how about we come up with a plan of how that's going to work?
Yeah.
So that's really important, to address. And look, I suppose, in my day-to-day practice, I've really tried to, and even with my own kids and friends, I try to use the word stressed, worried, overwhelmed instead of always using anxiety.
Yeah.
I think if we overuse the word, kids get sick of it, adults get sick of it. I think I want to normalize it, because when we do, then there's a greater likelihood that we know that if we do these strategies, we can reduce down to a baseline of planning. Because, you of all people know, Jodie, you're an expert on this, that when we're in that anxious state, when we're in that, heightened moment, you can't think clearly. And I think that's a real key for us to help ourselves as parents when we're parenting, when we're fearful, but also to help our children.
Yes. And I think too, there's no harm, is there, in if we do feel stressed or worried that we can, or if we can take time to come back to something. Like if our child says, I want to go to the city on the train. So
Yes.
Where are you based, Deirdre?
I'm in Glenara, so I'm on a train line.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I've had most of my kids travel. And you know what? I'm going to be super honest. My kids I used to live in Essendon on the other side of town. My kids were going to a school, and from the age of 9 and 10, they were on trains independent.
That is awesome.
And I had a phone, but it was like a flip phone. But yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. It was hard to let go. It made me feel sick in my stomach as my anxiety took over. But when they got to a point where I would offer to drive them, they would say to me, Jodie, no, I want to go on the train because I can spend more time with my friends.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I can't think of her name, but she was touted as kind of the worst mother in America, and she has an amazing organisation called Let Grow, and she's been a guest on the podcast, and I've gone blank on her name. Anyway, her son was riding the subway when he was 9, and he was able to move himself around the city, and that was something that she just wants more people to do, to let them grow, to let them have more independence and get out of the house and go and do the things that kids should be doing, riding to friends' houses and catching the bus and things like that. And so I applaud you for that, because I like our son catches a train into the city. We're on the Frankston line, so it's over an hour or an hour or so to Richmond to go to the MCG to watch the footy and stuff, and he'll do that with a friend, and then they'll catch the train home and someone will pick him up from the station. And so it's we've got to ask ourselves, with the decisions that we're making about what we're letting our kids do, why are we making the decision that we're making?
Yeah.
And
that's right.
Yes. Deirdre, time's flown, and I don't want to miss the chance for you to please share with our listeners. The work you're doing is incredible, and you're obviously working with children, you work with families, but there's many more strings to your bow. And so if you could talk to us about, I guess there'll be some parents who are thinking, does Deirdre have any availability for more patients? There are a lot of parents may be thinking that. So if you could just tell us a little bit about how people can connect with you and work with you through Bluestone Families, through your clinic, and about your incredible books too, please?
Thank you, Jodie. You're so kind. Look, I don't do clinical practice hardly ever. I've got some, clients that have been with me for a long time. So, I don't see new patients anymore, which I know is very sad, but it's what it is. 30 years doing a lot of one-on-one.
You've done plenty of hard work, so yes,
plenty of hours in that clinic. But during COVID, being in Melbourne, being in lockdown, I was really aware of starting to help, wanting to help parents, who wanted tools and strategies. And goodness, my shelf in there is full of parenting books, and every time a new one comes out, I buy it. But I realised that, and that's my passion. But parents are time poor; they want to help their kids. They don't have time to read a parenting book. But they were saying to me, Deirdre, I want to have your voice in my head when I'm at home. And, as I said, I used to be a teacher, and I've had a passion for children's books my whole life. So I've always wanted to write a children's book, but a children's book that would actually make a difference. Yeah. So I'm very lucky. My cousin, Jennifer Whelan, is an amazing artist. So we were sort of catching up on Zoom, during lockdown, and we sort of started working on this project, and we created this character called Bear. And there's actually, we've written 8 books in this series. 2 are already out. One's Bear Learns How to Be a Rainbow, which is about a bear who sits underneath a rainbow one day and gets very worried about what happens when the sun goes down, what happens when winter comes, and all these feelings that we know children feel, and grown-ups, and ask Rainbow what he can do. So it's a really beautiful, simple story, not too long, because as a mum, you don't want to be sitting all night reading a book. And it talks about, what you can do, and it's got a really practical toolkit at the back that's brief but evidence-based. So that was the first one, about feelings. The second one is about worry thoughts, sticky thoughts, and it's called Do Bears Who Eat Blueberries Go Bananas? And a poor bear read one day that apparently there was someone who ate a lot of blueberries and he went bananas, and the sticky thought follows him around. And it's this gorgeous, Jenny's the most amazing illustrator. I have no artistic ability whatsoever.
You are creative though.
I am, in a different way.
In a different way, yes.
Our friends. This beautiful moment of this. Well, it's not beautiful. The sticky thought follows him around all the time, and he can't enjoy himself because this sticky thought stuck in his head. And he meets Kookaburra, and it's a bit of a giveaway, but Kookaburra tells him what to do. He tells him to catch that sticky thought, shake it up and let it go. And the final phrase is, because Bear learnt that bears who eat blueberries don't go bananas, and a sticky thought doesn't like to get caught. And, it's underpinned with, evidence-based, cognitive behavioural therapy strategies, but it never talks about anxiety. It talks about a sticky thought and a fun way to catch it and get rid of it and put a boundary around the thinking. So they're the first 2 that are out, and they've done amazingly well. I was lucky enough, I got to go to the US, and, I got an author tour there, and it's in the UK. So those 2 sold out. We've done a reprint, and we've got our 3rd one coming out. It arrives here in July, and it's called Bear Learns How to Be a Fish. And it's, he wants to get to the pond, across the pond to get to his milkshake. But as you can imagine, he's got lots of worry thoughts, and he meets a lovely fish who helps him. So that's, there's more coming. It's quite the process of getting publishers to release. But we've been, so thrilled. And so part of my world at the moment is going into schools and reading to children, which is basically what I love doing. Helping give them, practical strategies through these books about how to manage those difficult moments. And great reaction, like just parents really saying it's a lovely moment to feel they're doing something to help their worried child, their overwhelmed child. As a parent, there's nothing worse than going, oh my God, they're worried, what am I meant to do? So sort of having, a psychologist in a storybook at home of an evening, which is,
Deirdre on your bookshelf.
I love that. I never thought of it like that.
Oh, Yes, it's just, and I can see like the illustrations are gorgeous. The book, and thank you again for sending them to me. And I can just behind Deirdre, I know listeners you won't be able to see, but there's the covers of the books and bears, little plushy bears on a chair, and some gorgeous. Are they illustrations behind you from the books?
Yes, yep, I got them. Look, Jenny had so many of them done, so I just got them printed out and framed.
Gorgeous, yeah, beautiful.
Feel good, and so many. And I decided to get the plush bear made, and so many of my family say, "Oh, it's her favourite toy," or
yes,
just when we read our book, and it's sort of lovely to have something sent through for them to connect with as well when they're reading. So
very much so, and a reminder when the book isn't around that the bear still carries the message.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Oh, and Bluestone families, could you just tell us briefly about, Bluestone retreats, I should say. You've got family and parent retreats. Could you just tell us briefly about those, and a website address, or how people can sort of learn more if they're keen to kind of connect with you?
Definitely. So we launched late last year, my business partner and I, a retreat offering in New Zealand. In this, many people will know how beautiful New Zealand is. You don't need me to tell you that, but but this was a specific offering and an exclusive estate that accommodates families. Look, it's in New Zealand. My business partner's in the US, so a lot of it has been for families flying down from the US to have their stay there. But if you're interested in hearing any more about it, Bluestone Families, you can Google that or follow me. And we've got lots of, obviously the retreats are to support families and empower them in real time, often coaching in a beautiful setting where children and families are doing activities. Just one family and myself and a team of wellbeing experts. And then we also offer parent retreats. So groups of parents, sometimes they're parents that know each other, that come over for a 3-night stay and get lots of beautiful relaxation experience, but lots of really practical knowledge. It's quite... We just actually had an interview with the Wall Street Journal on last week about it because, it's sort of New Zealand halfway between the US and Australia. So it suits us both to provide this, this opportunity for families. And again, getting back to what I was saying about skilling up and empowering parents to make a difference, because we know that's where the evidence is. That's why we started Bluestone Families, wanting to be able to support these people, make a difference and starting to enjoy their kids and parenting, just like I have.
Yes.
Like you said, plenty of lemons in there on that journey, but
Oh, thank you so much, Deirdre. Thank you. And for anybody looking to connect with Deirdre, I will put all the details in the show notes. If you're not sure where to access those, you can go to my website, drjodirichardson.com.au, and there is a podcast link there, and you can connect through and see the show notes, or you'll have the show notes obviously on your podcasting app, whether it's Spotify or Google Play or whatever it is, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is that you is the platform that you listen on. So Deirdre, thank you again so much for your time.
Oh, I just love chatting with you. Always happy to come back another time.
Oh my gosh, I was hoping you'd say that. It's a date. And listeners, thank you so much for joining me. And if there's anything in particular that you'd love for me to talk to Deirdre about next time, anything around parenting and children and mental health and relationships and connection and practical ideas, let me know. Just send me an email, and Deirdre and I will organise another time to chat. Either way, thank you again for your time. Hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll look forward to having another brand new episode back with you again next week. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr. Jodie Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.